Welcome back to the Eric Krown crypto channel, wishing you a happy and healthy start to this nice hump day over here, a hump day of which this week has been very uneventful. The last 48 hours, more or less just short-term time frame range, but there has been a big time frame closure last night, that being the 5 days. So I wanted to follow up on how that kind of influences the biases coming in the next 5 to 10 days, and then obviously that's going to spill on over into September, which was a focus of yesterday's video, still very much relevant right here as well. Anyways, first things first, let's just jump right on into it. I wanted to follow up on that 5-day signal, of which first I'll explain the signal and then what the last closure essentially means within the context of that. So first things first, we're looking at the 5-day BBWP indicator, which measures volatility, aka the dispersion of returns. Anytime that we have seen it get down to extreme lows, which are defined as 15 percentile or lower, the expansion phase from those extreme lows has led to an average move of about 45.13% done over the course of just under 37 days. So, a little bit more than a month. And the lowest of those reads has been 28.90%, and the highest has been 76.57%, which I thought was interesting. That, coupled with the direction of the 5-day stochastic momentum oscillator, has correctly gone the direction of the volatility expansion on actually all of the iterations in the past 4 years, going back to 2018, or almost 4 years now. So what do we have as of now? Well, the 5-day closed yet again. Did it close below the momentum pivot? No, it did not. It closed above. Does that incessantly mean that Bitcoin is going to choose the upside route for this volatility expansion? No, because when the signal is confirmed or how I define as signal confirmed is when the 5-day BBWP will have a positive slope that is non-negotiable, and then preferably above the moving average, with the moving average also having a positive slope, similar to what you saw back on over here, which was essentially driving our major downside biases from like above $40,000 to $30,000, for example. And there's been several more in the past couple of years, and even more going further and onwards from that. Anyways, in this case, there's a few things of interest. So Bitcoin, while it did close above the momentum pivot, it did close above by a ball sack hair at 21,520, which on a 5-day time frame, $400 above the momentum pivot is not much. So I did want to do a little bit more of an in-depth analysis on this potential signal, because there's a couple things going on here with the 5-day stochastic momentum oscillator, which would obviously bias this move towards a downside resolution. So in this case, we do see two things. We see one, the 5-day stochastic is actually right at the edge of the bearish control zone. Typically speaking, if you are, which is basically right here or around that low to mid 40s. Anyways, typically speaking, when you do see a reversion move into that region, it does typically at least try to push back on it. So in this case, you do kind of expect rejections around here. You'd be expecting something like that, again, especially with the presumed weakness as of right now, as Bitcoin's so close to that momentum pivot, as you can see right here. On top of that, we also do see that momentum has been slowly but surely ground down over the past few highs, going back to September 2021, actually. So we do kind of have a natural regression coming in somewhere right around here, which would kind of coincide with that. So ultimately, that would imply that if we're going to see this move, to the downside, we do expect it to really start in this next 5-day period, or less than 5-day period, I suppose, because, well, now it's like a few hours into the trading day, obviously. But at the same time, in the short term, can Bitcoin still bounce? Yeah, it's definitely possible to bounce, obviously. Basically, anything below about 22,400 is completely fair game as far as I'm concerned. I'm not saying that it's going to bounce, but if it does, that's kind of where I'm looking towards. Anything below there, again, quite bearish. Until then, do keep that number in mind, because that would, upon confirmation on the next 5 days, imply that Bitcoin, likely does at least retest the current lows and maybe makes new lows coming into September, which September has historically been a bad month for Bitcoin. To put this into perspective, a move towards our current lows would be about 30.59%, which is within, is that within the context or not of these stats over here? Technically speaking, it's above the lowest, that we've seen. It's definitely not that close to the average move. If we were to go all the way to 45%, that puts Bitcoin at about 15,000, give or take about $500 from that number. Now, I wanted to combine that with another chart that we've been really harping on quite a fair bit, and that is the daily CME versus stochastic volatility chart, of which this one's still very much relevant right here. And what I thought was very interesting about this one, as I'll first explain it, or actually I should probably first explain it, which is another stochastic versus volatility signature. The volatility component is represented by this metric that my cursor is currently tracing right now. Anytime that gets down to extreme lows, as denoted by these green vertical bars, like very, very low right here, the expansion phase from those extreme lows has led to an average move about 23.76% done over the course of about 8.5, 9 days. Stochastic momentum also has gone the correct direction on the volatility expansion about 90% of the time, or it's obviously going to be going up because it did it yet again. Anyways, the reason why I'm pulling this one out right here is for a couple reasons. First and foremost, the daily stochastic momentum pivot is going to be at 22,450. So that is to say that any sort of a bounce intraday here that fails to get above that region does still maintain pressure to the downside, and the signal is theoretically still alive, if you will. On top of that, let's start to play it with these average moves right here. So again, keeping in mind that there's variance within the average move, of course, but thus far, from high to low since signal was given, we've seen about an 18 and some odd change percent move to the downside. You know, is that within the context of this average move over here? I mean, it's getting pretty close, yeah. But you know, the average move obviously is a little bit more in this case. So, and as far as the average days, I should also denote when does this one start, like right in over here. We are on day number 7, actually. So, you know, you would kind of expect this if it is going to fulfill that average move to happen in the next, basically between now and end of week. So we do kind of expect this one to, you know, continue from here, maybe after another short-term pop to the upside, although we'll get to that once we get to the short-term timeframes. That's even relevant right now. Going into basically end of this week, I would say at latest Monday. So if it is going to happen, you know, we do look at that time frame, or at least I look at that time frame as most relevant. Obviously, you can draw your own conclusions from this. But again, as long as Bitcoin's below 22,450, momentum remains to the downside, and as long as momentum remains to the downside, the signal is still active. So until Bitcoin, you know, retakes that region on a daily closing basis, nothing's really changed here. And obviously, a 23.76% move, if we shave that off from the top here, would put Bitcoin like mid-ish $19,000 territory, which would obviously then put it well below the pivot over here at $21,000 for the 5-day. And well, that would be quite dastardly leading on into basically the end of this month, and then probably resolved into September, obviously. All right, so cool. So we've spoken about all of that. You know, until we get full on confirmation of this, you know, obviously it's a nice idea, and probabilities do remain to the downside. But if Bitcoin starts to crawl back above 22,450, that's where I really start to consider that this actually might be occurring on the other side, and we could see a move basically all the way up to like $30,000 or something like that into September, which again, the stats on September, not that confluent with that, as you probably already know. Again, we spoke about that on yesterday's video. Anyways, moving on here, I wanted to go over to this chart and call out a few things on the lower term time frames. So lower term time frames, yes, yesterday we did get a little bit of a bounce that we were speaking about. Bitcoin tests up all the way towards like 21.7, doesn't really even break the short term time frame range highs, nor lows in this case as well. But we do have yet another setup right here that does imply resolution is probably today, you know, amongst this range. 4-hour BBWP is on the lows. It's been on the lows for a long time. This is as long as it's been on the lows on this time frame, basically since the March move, which March was way back on over here, and that was precipitating a pretty nasty downside slide from $47,000 to 39-ish, let's say. And then obviously that continued over time as well, although I wouldn't accredit that to the 4-hour. But in this case, you know, we have a similar setup over here, and we do see that 4-hour RSI is starting to print hidden bearish divergence. Actually, it's not. So fair enough. I guess that makes things a little more difficult. But if we go over here and reference stochastic momentum, what's also very interesting about this is they're all pivoted around that same number as a 5-day. So if we start off with the 6-hour, the pivot is $21,000 in change, as you can see. The 4-hour is also showing a pivot at 21,100. So it's been heading up this whole time. Volatility is very, very low now. So we've seen the reversion play already. If that starts to turn down again and volatility starts to expand, probably going to see a nice downside move. Hourly is going to be headed up as long as Bitcoin's above 21,180 basically. So again, they're all pivoted around the same region, and the bi-hourly is pivoted actually 21,450. So it's the odd man out right there. If we go over to the 12-hour, then this one is going to be pivoted at $21,000 as well. So ultimately the question is, you know, how does Bitcoin resolve this day? Because we're probably going to see this move happen today. Or what sort of tangible price action levels would I look at as resolving the short-term time frame range, which very, very likely leads on into the higher-term time frame resolutions as well. So you can kind of see the domino pieces of all the time frames lining up here. So basically, in this case, We have our range highs right here on the 4-hour time frame, right around about 21,650 or so. I'm just kind of rounding right there, by the way. And to the downside is 20,750 or so to the downside. I would feel very confident saying we're going to see this range resolve today. If you do see it broken to the upside, you're probably going to get that move somewhere around that daily momentum pivot for CME, which is going to be 22,200 to 22,400 or so. If you see it to the downside, then very likely next move down below $20,000, basing somewhere off of, maybe mid 19s or so, with a bounce along the way, perhaps at about 20,003 to 20,400 or so. So again, kind of a lot's at stake today, and I do expect that we actually very likely do see resolution on the short-term time frame range. That's going to obviously bleed on into all the higher term time frames. So other than that, I don't really have anything new here. However, I did want to bring this out because it's actually a pretty good fucking deal. Bybit is actually offering a deposit $1,000 to get a $1,000 Ethereum airdrop. So usually when they do like these fucking like these deposit, like it's like you get $4,000 free, but you have to deposit like $100,000, which, yeah, I mean, to be fair, like they don't have to do any of that, So it's funny to me when people complain, but I get it at the same time. In this case, it quite literally does sound like $1,000 for $1,000. Anyways, the rules as I read them off the list over here are basically this. If you're a new or existing user who has used my link to Bybit in the description below, then you'll be, you can use it, I suppose. In order to claim the $1,000 airdrop, you'll need to do the following or meet the following requirements. You have to be signed up under my link, and then also deposit at least $1,000 USD into your derivative wallets within 7 days. And also there's actually one other catch. It's only for people who have not traded derivatives before. So if you have traded derivatives before, I guess they don't award you this. So fair enough. Maybe worth messaging them just to make sure that that's true. Anyways, I'm reading off script right now. That's fucking boring. So I'm going to be signing off. Want to be wishing you well as always. Much love. Take care and see you hopefully soon.